We have a green light. All right. Thank you so much for being here for today's educational event to hear from Mayor Purzycki and our new Police Chief Campos. Wilmington Mayor Mike Purzycki really needs no introduction, but I'm going to briefly fill in his picture for you. Mike was born in Newark, New Jersey, and he graduated from Seton Hall Prep. He earned a football scholarship to the University of Delaware, where he set all of the receiving records for Delaware. He was drafted by the New York Giants. He played for 1 year and then unfortunately had an injury, or perhaps fortunately, so that you didn't get any more concussions or anything. Right. Mike worked with IBM in data processing sales, worked as a stockbroker, and then in real estate sales and development while attending Delaware Law School at night. He was admitted to the Delaware Bar and served as an attorney for the Delaware State Senate, and then practiced law for over a decade. His first public office was the Newcastle County Council, where he served for 9 years as chair of the Finance Committee, and he wrote legislation that became the state's first ethics law. In 1996, Mr. Purzycki was tapped to head the Riverfront Development Corporation and was given the very challenging job of resurrecting the industrial wasteland around the Christina River. He and his team did what many thought would not be possible. They reinvented and reinvigorated that former World War II shipyard. The mayor continues to transform our city today with his vision. Mike also served for 10 years as chair of the Wilmington Hope Commission, during which he oversaw the opening of the Achievement Center. That's a building that houses a program for formerly incarcerated men who are transitioning from prison life back to life in the community. He's currently serving his second 4-year term as our mayor. There's, of course, much more I can say about Mayor Purzycki, but I know you want to hear him talk about his administration's efforts to combat violence in Wilmington. Our new police chief, Wilfredo Campos, is also our guest today. Mike will be introducing him, but please welcome Mayor Purzycki and Police Chief Campos.
Thank you, Pastor. I can tell you what kind of a frame of mind I've been in lately, that as I heard the pastor reading the introduction, it started to sound like my eulogy. Anyway, let me just say to you all, I'm very happy to be here. I told Charlie McDowell, with whom I rode in this morning, that this is one of the few churches that I actually look forward to attending. There's something very special about this congregation. There is a social conscience that exists here that you don't find everywhere, I will tell you. I have great friends here, and I'm delighted to be here and share some thoughts. I've been asked to come and speak to you about violence and our intent to reduce violence. The apparent suggestion is that violence is an overriding concern for people, and I think it becomes kind of a transcendent stamp that the city has had to deal with for some time, ever since back in 2014 when we got dubbed Murder Town. And I will tell you, as when I was at the Riverfront went out during that time, and when we had that Newsweek article, I think it shocked everybody. It didn't shock everybody because of the embarrassment of having this terrible distinction. It shocked everybody because I don't think anybody understood that we had disproportionate violence in our city at that time. I don't think anybody ever understood it, like so many things that divide our country, where the people on this side of town really don't understand what's going on over there. And the truth is, all the violence took place over here. And so that was kind of a wake-up call to us. It kind of pushed violence to the front of our consciousness instead of having it being suppressed. So I became mayor in 2017. My first 4 days as mayor, there were 3 homicides. And I turned to Betty and I said, oh my God, what did we get ourselves into? And 2017 turned out to be, to that point, the most violent year in our history. Mid-year, I think in April, we hired Bob Tracy out of Chicago and New York, because I really believed we just needed a different approach to our policing at that time. And we brought in Chief Tracy, and he transformed the department. He just changed he changed the discipline, the methodologies, he changed the culture. And for that, I'm forever grateful. I'll introduce Chief Campos. I think later on, I think Chief Campos is going to take what's everything great about what Bob Tracy left us and add his own style, which I think is going to take this department to a higher level. So let's talk about recent crime. As I said, in 2017, we had a very high rate of crime. 2018, after Bob Tracy got here, crime started to drop. So we went from 36 homicides in 2017 to 22 in 2018, 23 in 2019. Look, still high, so there's nothing to be proud of about those numbers, but a considerable drop from where things were. And here's what happened that was really, that I don't think people understand. 2020 and 2021, crime spiked across the country. Here's why. When we had the pandemic, all the institutions closed, the courts closed, so there were no trials. So people who were accused of crimes never could get to trial. And I think the judges, for the most part, had two things in mind. One, it's not fair to put somebody in prison for 2 years waiting for trial, because we don't know when the courts are going to open up. So they were more permissive about letting them out. And then the other thing was, they said, I don't want these guys to go to prison where they had this eruption of COVID. And early on, everybody's panicked about who's going to die from COVID. So judges are letting people out on the streets. And the tragedy is that people don't like to face up to is that people who are habitual criminals tend to go right back and do what they know best. And so that was kind of the tragedy of those years. Now what's happened across the country is when we got to 2022, across the country in major city after major city, homicides dropped 5%. Ours dropped 62%. So our police department has done an extraordinary job in dealing with crime, and as a result, that becomes homicides too. Homicides just one function of criminal behavior. But it's a good measure to say that where other places crime are celebrating that when things went down 5%, we literally dropped more than half from our worst year in 2021 of 40 homicides down to 18. What's significant about that, because people who tend to be critics say, well, big deal, you had this huge number, so it's not very impressive that you dropped down from a huge number. I mean, maybe that's not as good a deal as you think. Well, here's what's important. Our homicide rate is the lowest it's been in 15 years. The lowest it's been in 15 years. And the number of shootings that took place in the city was the lowest in 17 years, but for 1 year. So it's the second lowest time in 17 years. So we feel pretty good comparing this year against ourselves in prior years. We're doing better. So let's talk a little bit about how we stack up against other cities, because I think that's fair. Other cities with similar demographics. So a city that we're always compared to is Camden. Camden is literally within 500 people, the same size city. It has a very similar demographic. It has a similar rate of poverty. So it's not a bad city to compare ourselves to. And Camden was kind of the fair-haired child for a while, because they had a fellow named Scott Thompson who came in and reformed a very, very dangerous Camden with 60 homicides per 100,000 down to less than half that. So if you compare these two cities against one another, last year, Camden had 28 homicides. We had 18. So you say, well, we're doing better than a city that tends to get high marks for their community engagement and all the things they did to improve violence. So that's that. Trenton, we're right even with Trenton. We're just a little bit behind. I mean, it's depending on which statistic you use. We're just about the same as Philadelphia. Bad comparisons when you compare yourself to Philadelphia. It's a city of 1.6 million. It's got sprawling suburbs, and it's really hard. It's hard to be able to make a comparison of our small 70,000 city to a city that has neighborhoods that are 70,000 in size. So, if depending on which neighborhood we picked on, I think you'd see that we're in much better shape. It's a dreadful problem over there. As an aside, I remember when Jim Kenney. Some of you may remember when Jim Kenney was heard to say, "I can't wait till this is over. I can't wait till I don't have to worry about this stuff every single night." And when he said it, everybody in my office and my senior staff and I were thinking, "Way to go, Jim. Just tell them what you really think, a moment of candor. Try to explain to people what it's like to get a call in the middle of the night, as we do on occasion, and to find out that a 14-year-old shot a 15-year-old. I mean, it's enough to just make you, it makes your guts in a knot. But I was so happy that he said it. Everybody deserved to hear that. And instead, everybody beat the hell out of the guy. And by the time the day was over, he was apologizing, saying, "I didn't really mean it." Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You can't wait to be able to sleep at night. But that's kind of the framework of this thing. The statistics don't convey the personal agonies that occur everywhere in this job, and with the job that the chief shares with me. It's not a matter of saying this is not like this test score is better than that test score. This is children shooting children. Let me just give you a couple of other statistics that I think are important for the framework of the discussion about crime and then policing. So we had, in 6.5 years, not quite 6.5, that I'm mayor, we have had five officer-involved shootings. That's less than one a year, where a police officer discharged his weapon. In those 5 cases, 2 were fatal. One case, a young man in Trolley Square called for the police. And when the police showed up, he aimed his weapon at the cop, and of course, our officer shot him. He was trying to commit suicide, and he did it effectively. The second one was a man standing in the middle of 35th, 6th, 7th up on Washington Street, just firing aimlessly in the middle of the street, scaring the hell out of everybody in the neighborhood. Police came, told him to drop the weapon. He wouldn't drop the weapon. He aimed it carelessly, and they shot him. They're the 2 times when there were fatalities in this city. During that same time, we've had 660 shootings. 660 shootings. We've had, I think, about 150 homicides. We've had about 120 of those shootings were by juveniles, kids. And we see it all the time, and it's beyond tragic when you see this. Our police, okay, here it is, 152 murders and 125 were juveniles. Let me tell you what it's like to see a 14-year-old kid on that police blotter. And we see it all the time. During that time, our police have taken an extraordinary 1,433, there have been 1,430 gun arrests. They have arrested people with firearms over 1,400 times during the time I'm mayor. And remember, there have only been 5 officers discharging the weapon during that time. I mean, you're running down alleys with somebody who's got a gun. At any moment, they can turn around and use that gun. Our officers responded about a year ago to an incident over on Baynard, is that where it was? Baynard, Washington. And someone holed up in a room holding a woman hostage. And by the time the whole episode was finished, 3 officers were shot. We had 3 officers who were shot by this individual. He wound up taking his own life. But that's kind of the framework. And in the middle of 1,433 gun arrests, they only discharged their weapons 5 times. I mean, it's a remarkable story. So I talked to you about those other cities. You know, I said, you know, it's easy to compare yourself. You know, you say, are we good or are we not good? And so we're just about even with Trenton, almost exactly with Richmond. Here's the outlier. The outlier is Newark, New Jersey, where I grew up. And Newark's got a tough demographic. There's nothing about Newark that would suggest that here is a very, you know, it's not like going to some city where you've got a white middle class and say, well, don't compare us to that. That's a whole different demographic. No, Newark's is very similar, probably not quite as large number of minorities, but the same basic number and the same level of poverty. And against our 25 per 100,000 homicides a year, they have 11. And so we went up to Newark. I met with Ross Baraka, the mayor, and we talked to them about an organization that's been working up there called Aquila. And they have an approach to gun violence which is, generally speaking, and this is evolving before our eyes, they put ambassadors out on the streets, and ambassadors tend to be the eyes and ears of the organizations that they work for, who are trying to identify problems before those problems occur. They're trying to identify, in my vision of this, they identify every home that's got problems, and it's easy to find them, believe me. Identify those homes that have problems, even though there's no crime committed. You know, we can't call the police and say, go arrest this guy. You start to identify homes that this is a place where problems are going to occur. Let me just tell you something. There's not a teacher that teaches in the city, or anywhere for that matter, who can't tell you which kids are going to wind up over at Ferris. There's not a teacher over there who doesn't understand this kid's a problem and we're going to have problems with them. So we think, let's get these folks out into the community so we can see if we can't intercept some of these things before they occur. Let me just tell you right now, everybody talks about that. Most of them are pretty bad at it because execution is the issue. It's just about who you put out there, how you train them, and whether they can really perform. You can teach someone how to, I mean, this is a lousy metaphor, you can teach someone how to throw a ball. It doesn't mean they're going to be a great pitcher. You know, so you've really got to get people out there and train them well to do this job. And so that's kind of where we are right now. Can I tell you some of the things that we've done that I think have really changed our fortunes when it comes to crime is we do something called GunStat, where we meet twice a month. Is that what we do? Twice a month? And people at my level meet in those meetings once a month. Attending the meeting is WPD, the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney. They never miss. Kathy always comes. David always comes. ATF, Youth Services. Did I miss anybody?
And the cabinet secretaries.
And the cabinet secretaries as well. So we get everybody in the room and we talk about the gun violence. We talk about gun offenders and gun arrests. And so it's very, very deliberate. It's not on some sergeant's desk somewhere to decide how to dispose of these problems. We literally have the law enforcement brain trust of this entire community in one room down at the police department deciding what's the best thing to do here and which arm of criminal justice is best served, best able to deal with this. And I'll sit here and listen to someone said, we can't get this fellow in for more than 3 years, but we can get him in for 5 years. The feds can do more. And here's the sad truth. The sad, simplistic truth about crime is there are people who are just disposed to antisocial, dysfunctional behavior. And they go anywhere from 13 and 14 years old right up to 30 years old. And what we have to do in the criminal justice system, if we're worried about the rest of our community, is remove them from the streets. I often say, I don't care if we put them in the Hotel de Pont. I am not trying to punish anybody. If there's any place in the world where we ought to sit here and agree that it's not up to us to punish anybody, right? Judge anybody? No, I'm not. But I know who we have to remove from the streets, because as soon as we put people back out there, they commit crimes. Do you know in 2020, because remember we told you they closed the courts down, we had 2 men waiting for trial who were murdered on the streets. They're sitting here waiting for trial. They're happy that they're not in jail. Well, what happened to them when they're out in the street? They were shot and killed. So that's what happens. We have people who are really, they're people with a serious problem, and they have terrible records, and it's our job is to remove them from the streets and try to help them to the best we can. So that's GUNSTAT. Then we have GVI, Group Violence Intervention. I was asked in the communication from your Peace and Justice Committee to make a comment on the assessment of GVI. There has been an assessment. There's a draft report, and I wasn't privy to it. But we discussed it a little bit with some of the folks who are, and I think they expect that the report will be positive. That is to say, we have young people who are in these groups and gangs who commit violence, and we get them in front of our infrastructure with GVI, and basically give them 2 choices. You can go back to that. You can go back to what you know, or else there's an escape ramp we're giving you with a lot of support, and hopefully people take that. And so we're going to see how that works out as well. What else did I forget for what we're doing? So Senate Bill 7 was advanced by our Attorney General back a year and a half ago, and what that did was require that the JP courts and the courts that impose bail increase the bail for what they call signal offenses, the serious violent crimes. Because as I was saying, some of these guys have a lot of money. You're in a drug business, you got plenty of cash, and they ask for bail, they give them the bail, and they go back out and do more of it again. So I think we've done a lot that we can attribute our successes in 2022 to. This month we've had 3 homicides. A woman stabbed her husband to death. It's not a police problem. A guy from Chester came down and found his girlfriend with another guy and shot him. I don't think that's a police problem. The third one was standard issue drug stuff. And all I can tell you is that I feel very, very positive. I feel very positive about our department. I feel very positive about our city. After I introduce the chief, I'll say some closing remarks about the state of our city. But I feel that this city is probably in a stronger place than it's been since I've been around, and that's a fairly long time. But one of those things that I think that I did that I'm very proud of is that I selected Wilfredo Campos, Captain Campos, as for our chief. So when Bob Tracy decided to go to St. Louis, wow, what a job he's got. St. Louis, I think, it's in the rotation between 1, 2, and 3 most dangerous cities in America. So he's out there, and we've spoken. He's got a tremendous challenge. But so what was I going to do when I had to fill those shoes? And honestly, the very first thought I had was for then Captain Campos, because he had such a good reputation. I think that view has been vindicated after that selection, widely well received by the rank and file, well received by the community, trusted by the community. And I think when you get to know him, you'll find that he's somebody who's going to add a dimension of the community. I don't want to call him a community cop, but I do think there's some of that. Someone who's very, very close to the community. I think he's going to create a softer touch and create a lot of confidence in our community and our police department. So with that, let me introduce our new chief, Chief Wilfredo Campos. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first, I want to thank everyone for having me here today on this Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. It's hopefully the Eagles have a big victory this afternoon. So
Fly, eagles, fly.
I just want to say, I want to echo the mayor's remarks. When Chief Tracy came in 2017, I've been here 26 years. I grew up in this police department, and as you all probably know by now, I grew up on the west side of Wilmington, right down the street at 6th and Broome, 6th and Clayton. When he first came here, we didn't always have a sort of a structure. It was almost like we were just chasing our tail over and over and over, and there wasn't a lot of planning going on. And when he came into town and the police department, he starts setting that tone of this is how we're going to be running the police department from now on. And it was that business model approach to policing. How do we measure ourselves? How do we know if we're doing better than last year? How do we know we're doing better this week than the same week the previous year? And so forth and so on. So when he came in, he set the tone. We are still continuing that methodology of CompStat, which is that business model approach to policing. And the reason some of these reductions in crimes have been taking place is because we've stayed consistent with our methodology. We never changed, we never wavered, even through the pandemic. We still came into the police station, we still met as a team, and we continue to push that message forward. So one of the things that we do for every, non-shooting, but someone discharges a weapon, we still review those as if someone got hit, even though no one got hit, right? So, because they're just as important. Someone's out there firing a weapon, whether it's at someone or like on New Year's Eve or 4th of July, people go out and, celebrate in a weird way and start shooting firearms up in the air sometimes. So, but every time we have a shots fired, as we call it, we go out, we pick up the casings, we put them in our NIBIN, which is ATF computer, which gives us the ability to be able to link cases regionally and even nationwide sometimes. And we review them. We pull the videos to see if ring cameras that picked up a suspect vehicle or picked up someone, and then we share that information with our police officers who have the technology in their vehicles to say, hey, this is the person that was out here firing his weapon. He's dressed in this, sort of clothing, and they have that ability to go out now in real time and look for these individuals in case they see them. So, and we do this every Monday. We meet as an executive staff at 10:30 to go over what happened over the weekend. Are we missing something? What occurred? What can we follow up on? And then we meet again on Wednesday to go over the same thing. What happened from Monday to Wednesday? Did we miss something? What do we need to plan for? And then on Thursday, which is CompStat and the mayor attended last week, is the 2-hour meeting that we have with our executive staff, our intelligence officers, our outside partners. We all come in, and it's about accountability. Everyone's in that room, and we're all held accountable, including myself. I expect my command staff to know what occurs in their district, because if they don't know what's going on, then we can't expect the police officer who's working the beat, to know everything that's going on. So when that police officer knows that the captain knows everything from someone breaking into a vehicle to someone getting shot and killed, then it all matters, and they're all held accountable. So we meet in this room for 2 hours. We go over everything that occurred in the city for the last 7 days, and we try to say that we missed something. What do we need to plan for moving forward? And then on Friday we meet again, the executive staff, to go over what's coming up on the weekend, so that we don't miss anything. Whether it's a parade, whether it's a protest, whether it's a community event, whether it's a funeral that's going to bring in a lot of people, whether it's a president coming back into Wilmington. We meet as a staff to go over what's going to happen on the weekend. I always say you have to plan for the unexpected, right? If we have a plan in place and something happens, then at least we have everyone's aware of what's going on, and we can respond to it quicker and effectively. So, what I'm really excited about is on Tuesday, we're putting out a community engagement unit. And it's basically an extension of police officers under the command of a lieutenant and a sergeant that are going to be assigned to districts. Now, we still have the methodology of keeping the same police officers in the same areas, so they get to know the conditions, they get to know the residents, they go to community meetings, they hear things firsthand of what's going on, so they can go out and address it. These individuals are going to expand on that. They're going to be able to do more problem solving. That vehicle that everyone calls about that's abandoned or suspicious and no one seems to get to it, these officers are going to be responsible for taking care of that, whether it's two neighbors that can't get along because of a fence or a barking dog or something that requires continuous police resources, where the officer working that district needs to continue to go there and make the peace with these neighbors. Now these individuals are going to have the ability to sit down and bring in social service that are going to be available to them through the Attorney General's office or through the state of Delaware and even the city of Wilmington to work on these long-term issues, those vacant properties where people continue to pull down the boards and there's illegal activity occurring inside. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to expand on the outreach efforts that we're doing, like our community resource fairs, where we bring in state social service partners to offer resources to the community, whether it's our community walks and working with those. This unit's going to be also be working with those that are homeless, those individuals who have substance abuse issues that are, just need some help. So I've done that in the past as a sector captain, worked with Heroes Help out of Newcastle County Police, where they bring in the state resource van. We go out, we do community outreach work with state social service partners, and we bring these individuals back, if they're willing, obviously, to offer them resources that are available to them to get out of that life of either, whether it's prostitution, whether it's drugs, addictions, wherever it may be, those resources are offered to them. So that's what I'm excited about this unit, to expand on the work that we're already doing with CompStat. Now we're going to have that other element of that community outreach work that's going to be available. So those are things that we're working on. I thank the mayor for, we're also going to bring in an officer, a wellness dog. That seems to be the theme across the country is it's a dog that comes in and he works with this unit, goes out to the schools, works with victims of violent crime when they come into the police station, especially children. A dog seems to bring down the stress level and the anxiety of everyone. It's going to be, I think it's either a golden retriever or a lab. It's an organization out of Texas that trains these dogs. It's free of charge. They give them to us. I know the Capitol Police Department at the courthouse, the judges love them. They take the dog into, victim services, and the kids just have a great time with them from the feedback that I've gotten. So this dog is going to be in the police station. It's going to be for the community. It's also going to bring the stress level down and the anxiety of the officers who are coming in to work at the roll call. So the dog's going to be walking around.
Can he come up to my office? Can he spend a little time in my office?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that.
I'd like to say something. I don't want to not have the opportunity to say this. We keep focusing on police all the time. And I told you, I think this is the limits of what police can do. Take the bad guys, get them off the streets, and just try to create an environment that is less inclined with crime. If we don't, as a society, start to strengthen these neighborhoods, nothing's going to change. I mean, our neighborhoods, the more impoverished neighborhoods, they're just petri dishes for crime. And unless we get smart about this and start uplifting these families and children from the bottom up, it's not fair to keep looking at police and say, we take care of it. Let me just tell you, we will have, and this is part of the problem, this is a little bit of the political problem of this environment, is we will have people complain that police were too tough on people, right? We hear it all the time. You just use too much force. 10 minutes later, when there's a shooting, they're calling us and saying, we need more police over there. Why can't you get more police over there? I mean, this is a very difficult environment to try to navigate. But at the bottom, if we don't rebuild neighborhoods rebuild neighbors, help kids in school. Our kids don't do well in school across the board. They just don't. The numbers are very dispiriting. And so if you don't do well in school, all of a sudden there are all these other paths that don't get followed. And the paths that do get followed are not ones that we want our kids to follow. So I think it's important that this police business has a context. And the context is everybody turns to them the way we turn to our teachers. Why can't you teach our kids? I talked to a woman who's the head of academics at one of our grammar schools, our elementary schools. And I said, how are the kids to deal with? She goes, the kids aren't bad. Their parents are terrible. So what happens? The parents come in and say, I can't believe my kid failed. What's wrong with you? You didn't teach them. We got to get our heads straight about this. It's all wrong. But this whole department, I'm just telling you, we have a great department. And I gave you statistics earlier. No other department of the state even has anything to come close to those numbers where they're in those stressful situations all the time and comport themselves remarkably well. The other thing I want you to know, Charlie had a suggestion for me, and he said, ask a question. How many people here live in the city of Wilmington? Good. It's a relatively small number, but I'm happy to have you here. How many of you been down to Market Street to see what we're doing on Market Street with all the different restaurants and all the construction and everything else? Well, that's good. That's very good. The city is doing extremely well. It really is. We've got 1,000 apartments being built all over, not just Buccini Poland, but other investors and developers. We've got new restaurants on every corner. We've got hotels being built and people moving in. Our problem is the same problem that America has. We have our employers allowing our employees to work at home, which really impacts our wage tax. It's our largest source of revenue. And we had a meeting about it not too long ago, and they're almost powerless. They almost feel like, well, we have to, or else they're going to go to work somewhere else. I don't know when that changes, but it's not going to change when unemployment's at 3.4%. So that's an issue for us. But on the other side, we have people moving in. So, if either you work here or you live here, we still get 1% of your revenue, which it's not terrible, right? I mean, but it's important for us. But we feel good about the city. It's really in great shape, but in the end, it's hard to feel good about things when you still know that there's a side of town that struggles, and it's just our responsibility as human beings, which is why I like coming here, because I know that people in this church care about those things and work toward advancing not just the state of the souls in heaven, but the people down here on earth. So I think that's about all I have to say. If there are questions, we'll probably run out of time, but we're both happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
So crime doesn't necessarily respect boundaries?
Correct.
So you're talking about the city of Wilmington, which is within Newcastle County.
Right.
Can you discuss how you interact between the city and the county? Because, if you're enforcing a certain area, crime will spread somewhere.
So yeah, you touched a nerve because someone wrote an
Hey,
article.
Mike, repeat the question because the.
Well, the question is that crime doesn't respect boundaries, and can you tell us how you interact with other jurisdictions in trying to reduce crime? And I'm going to let the chief do that, but let me just tell you, it touched the nerve because somebody wrote an article, a scold as far as I'm concerned, wrote an article and said, the reduction in crime is no big deal because the reduction in crime took place throughout the rest of the state as well, ignoring your observation that if crime reduces in Wilmington, it's going to help reducing crime everywhere, which it did. For example, we had a big gang arrest, North Pack. 19 kids got arrested, 19 kids. And let me tell you, I've seen their records. These kids are tough, and they commit lots of stuff. Why don't you talk, Chief, about working with other jurisdictions?
Yep, so we have a network where our investigators, our criminal investigators and our drug investigators are in touch with the Newcastle County and the State Police, Ellesmere, Newport, and even Dover, for that matter, where if, for instance, we have an issue in this country, not just in Wilmington, where we have a high percentage of vehicles that are stolen. And a lot of these vehicles are being used in shootings because they obviously can't track them back to the individuals who are doing it. As soon as those vehicles are stolen, we put that out in whatever jurisdiction, and they put that out amongst themselves in their network to let them know, hey, someone just stole a white Kia Sportage from Bear, and our officer, that information is pushed out to the officers in Wilmington so that they can be aware of it. And also we meet every Monday. It's our intelligence meeting. Right now it's done via Zoom. Hopefully we can get it back in person. And there's about 45 people on that call. Newcastle County, Delaware State Police, all the surrounding agencies, probation and parole, both the juvenile and adult, as well as federal probation and parole officers, and some even youth services individuals, GVI. So all that information sharing. So if there's a shooting in Newcastle County or in Dover for that matter, we share that information among the investigators so that we're not working in a silo where we're all looking for the same individual, but no one's sharing information. Well, this intelligence meeting pretty much takes care of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Will the city take the necessary steps to reduce and remove packaged alcohol stores that sell alcohol in impoverished areas? And will they implement curfews in those impoverished areas? And will they hold parents accountable for children who take the guns out of the house because the parents have been irresponsible in locking up the weapons and storing their security?
So, we have purchased 4. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a long question. I have a 77-year-old brain. I don't know if I can remember them all. Yeah. Will we close the liquor stores in the impoverished neighborhoods or set limitations on their use? It's a little tricky because we just can't say in this neighborhood we limit sales. We have to limit everywhere, and then there's a lot of blowback to that. But I have directed my economic development office to purchase 4 liquor stores over the years because they just attract the worst. I mean, they are just places where dysfunction gathers. And so we've tried to do that, and we've tried to bring L&I out there to try to, it's best to keep them adhering to all the standards, which very often they don't, so we can close them for a little while. Second question, go ahead and just remind me.
Implement
Curfews. Oh yeah, curfew is a big problem. So, thank you, very good. Curfews just, first of all, they tend not to work. I mean, so if you have a curfew, here's what the police will tell you. If you give us a curfew, we are going to spend all day long picking up kids and taking them in instead of going out where we should be and addressing the issues of crime, right? I mean, that's what I think the response is. And then it gets to be a tactical problem of just getting all the kids off all the streets. And then, moreover, which is really disturbing, is crime takes place in the middle of the afternoon. So I think there was a time when all the crime took place after 11 o'clock. Today, it takes place all day, any day. When I first came on, a little 6-year-old was hit in the head at 12 o'clock in the afternoon over on the east side with his mother and his aunt in the car. They're just going from here to there. And 2 idiots started to shoot each other, and this poor little boy was shot. So I don't know that the curfew necessarily is effective as all of us believe it should be, unless we just keep everybody off the street. Then you got to be careful, because the worst thing in the world is to say, okay, we're going to identify this neighborhood as a high crime area so nobody can go out. I mean, then it gets to be very discriminatory. And then you had a third one mixed in there, and I forget it.
Holding parents accountable for not
Wouldn't I love to
properly
do that?
securing
I mean,
weapons and
honestly,
children bringing weapons to school.
yeah, we should. Well, first of all, the one thing you can hold parents accountable for is if a child takes a gun out of the house that belongs to the parent. Unfortunately, in the world that we're in, Chief, you can check me on this, most of the guns are stolen and are purchased illegally, and then these kids own them. It's not the parents. Look, bad parenting is a problem everywhere, but I'm not sure I know how to do it except calling people out for it. And to tell you the truth, I'm the wrong person to go out there. I'm the wrong person to go into town and start screaming about parents. We need people from the community. Ultimately, none of this changes. None of this changes unless people in the community start demanding an uplifting of behaviors and standards of people in the community. And that's what we're trying to do, is try to get, where are the leaders who are willing to stand up and say, look, I have a young woman who works for me, happens to be African American. She said, people of my generation are terrible parents. I won't say that anywhere else, Mayor, but I'll tell you. I mean, so I think people know that there is a lack of parenting going on in some of our poor neighborhoods. Look, there's all kind of reasons why, we all understand them, but still nothing changes unless that changes. You know, these children, they need to be given guardrails. They need to have expectations and aspirations built into their lives. So, you know, somebody from my part of the world, very difficult to judge others or sound like I'm judging others, and I'm not, but I know if we don't do that, nothing is going to get better. But thank you for that question.
Last week, Camilla and I were leaving Emmanuel Dining Room after we had served lunch, and we observed a very distressing situation. Obviously, we were not in a position to do anything, but when a citizen sees something like that happen, how do we respond to that? How do we get help for that?
What kind of a situation?
There was a man attacking a woman.
Yeah, well,
She was instigating it. They were both complicit in the situation, but I thought, you know, and they were halfway out into the street, so it was a dangerous situation.
yeah, I would call 911 with that question.
Okay, thank you.
You don't want to get in the middle of that, I can tell you. Anybody else? Way back? Sure. No, but it's cursing the darkness right now. What do we do? I mean, you know, the debate around guns, the gun debate's lost. There are 440 million guns on the street, way more than there are people in America. And guns are everywhere. And now we have ghost guns. And now we have, what's the guns with the little, you know, the guns that are made by,
The printer.
the 3D printers are making guns. I mean, the proliferation of guns is just a mark of our collective insanity, regardless of your politics. We got guns everywhere. You know, children have guns. Everybody. It's just such a plague in our community, and people feel like I've got a right to own a gun. Now, we can take guns away from people who've got previous records. You know, you can do that and charge them for that matter because they're persons prohibited. But it's very difficult to get those guns off the street. God, if we could ever, that would be wonderful. And the other thing I think you talked about was the, you know, impulsivity of teenagers. I mean, and some of these kids have mental health problems, and everybody's talking about mental health. I have no idea what that infrastructure looks like to try to get mental health services available to everybody who needs it. I think that's a challenge for us. But you know, my sense is we're spending $20 million on the east side alone to build up this neighborhood. We are going to rebuild this neighborhood to the extent that it's never happened before. And I think what we're trying to do is let kids especially internalize some sense of personal value because the community seems to respect them. Here's where I live. Beautiful houses are going up. The parks are beautiful. The lighting is bright, and so I feel safe. I mean, all those things that I'm hoping kids internalize and modify behavior. Yes, sir.
For Chief Campos, what's the staffing level like for the police department?
Good one.
Right now, we're at 295. We're authorized to have 312. through military obligations and FMLA and people being out injured and so forth and so on. We probably have about 286 available for the street.
Is that light? Is that comfortable?
It's almost usually what we operate at. In a perfect world, I love to be at 312 all the time, but retirements and so forth and so on, people leaving to other police departments, whether it's federal or state. We're never at 312. We're always, chasing that. But right now, we're in the process of going through City Council to get a class put in place. Hopefully, it start in August to replenish those ranks.
So we have time for one more question before people need to get to 11:15 service.
I'm from New York, and over the years, we've had a significant gang problem with a lot of the young people. And I'm wondering, what is the situation here in Wilmington with the gangs amongst the younger people? And are there any programs, police athletic league, or some way trying to interface with the kids to get them off on a better, to get them in a better place?
I think I'll let the chief talk about gangs, what we do. I talked about GVI, Group Violence Intervention. I will tell you that all the programming at in the community centers don't seem to work. They just don't seem to have any of the appeal that they did when we were young. All of us saw people play basketball. Nobody plays. I mean, they do, but kind of. Chief, why don't you talk about the gang issues?
Yeah, the gang issues. So we've identified these kids that are involved in these groups. Some are more, better connected, and some are just loosely people calling themselves gangs or putting a name to a small group of individuals. But the bottom line is to try to educate these kids. So even when we do arrest them, we work with the cabinet secretary over Youth and Family Services, and with the hope that they're being rehabilitated, that they're being offered programs at whether at Ferris or at the detention center. So it's something that we continuously work with, because the bottom line is that we want to get this child away from a life of crime. When a 15-year-old is carrying a firearm, there's a deeper issue, as we all know, of what's going on. Why does a child need to carry a firearm? So we do have those programs at the detention center in Ferris, and part of Gunstead, when we all meet, is that secretary is there, and she's listening to the individuals that are being arrested, so that they can offer them some resources.
Dennis.
Mayor Purzycki, I'd just like to thank you. I remember you were here about 5 or 6 years ago with Father Boyle, who was talking about.
That's great.
Who was talking about
Yep.
what he's done in California someplace. I don't remember very many things of what you said, but I do remember you talking about fighting this crime not only with the head but with the heart. And I just have to thank you, because that was the most memorable part of it. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate what Chief Campos is doing in terms of following through with it. But
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
I would just like to thank Mayor Purzycki and Chief Campos for being here today. Obviously, the issues of crime, of gun control, of peace in our communities, the issues are everywhere, the actions are everywhere. We appreciate your efforts. We appreciate your spending time with us here this morning. We look forward to keeping up with what's being proposed to deal with crime in our cities, to support programs and initiatives that help our children grow into healthy, functional adults. And we appreciate all of your support by being here as well. So thank you again.
Ready?